As any character in the game, killing a support is like that holy grail. The tank has less resources, your team could push in, and you're probably going to win the fight. So in this video, we're going to teach you how to counter and farm every single support in the game. But smash the subscribe or else a life weaver is going to pull you off the map in your rank up game. And let's jump into the video. Now, the first character that we got to talk about is Ana. Now, Ana is a character that, if left untouched, gets a ton of value, especially with these aggressive grenades that just come out and just completely change an entire fight, and sleep darts that can feel really daunting to push and play against. Whether you're a support, DPS, or tank, most of the time you want to shut down that Ana, but it's not so easy. When you push an Ana, she typically gets a lot of support from her team, and she has all these abilities that she could just dump into you, plus a really freaking high damage rifle. Like, there's a lot going for Ana that makes her rather hard to counter or kill. Now, the most easy way to counter an Ana is, of course, with a Kiriko, where you have that Suzu for a nade, and you can play rather aggressive on her yourself. But every character can make an Ana less effective by constantly forcing this Ana into situations where she's using nade defensively. Like, if you play really passive, let the Ana play in whatever position she wants, and never takes any damage, the Ana is going to get to throw these aggressive nades over and over again for free. So it's your job to, at the very least, threaten a potential push on the Ana so that she's more reserved with these nades. You don't have to go for all the time, but realizing when she does use her nade in an aggressive way and looking to pivot off of that is a great thing overall. And then, of course, off-angling on DPS on Ana, especially when an Ana is scoped in. She's not going to be moving very much, so characters like Hanzo, Widowmaker, any hit scan in the game, going to have a really easy time dealing with an Ana if you come at her from an unsuspecting angle. Now, sometimes your job as a tank is not necessarily killing the Ana, but putting her out of the line of sight of her tank. So, like, if I'm Doomfist, for instance, I could punch an Ana around the corner, and then I can turn on her tank, getting her out of the fight, and then turning on the target that she was actually enabling. Same thing with a character like Ryan or Zari or anything. You force them out of space, don't necessarily chase them around the corner, because then you're the one caught out away from your team, and you're the one that's potentially going to get slept and focused by the enemy team, but you're just getting her out of the way so that you can then focus on that front line. Now, of course, we do got to talk about Nano, particularly Nano combos like Ramatra combo or Nano Blade. These things can feel unbeatable, and especially if you know that they're coming up. One of the best ways to force a disconnect or create a mistake is by heavily aggressing onto the Ana, putting the Ana in a situation where the Ana is actually too pressured to make the proper Nano, or might even die before they give it to the target, and then you have a Genji blading in without Nano, and we all know what happens to that Genji. In addition to that, even if the Ana gets the Nano off, you got to realize that with a combo like this, the entire team's going to be mobilizing forward, and you're probably going to be able to have an isolated one-on-one with an Ana. And it doesn't really matter what role you are here. You could be a tank, a DPS, or even a support. This could be something that you could do that would carry a fight, and it's super powerful. Next up, let's talk about Baptiste. Baptiste can be rather annoying to deal with. Immortality can be frustrating, of course, because it can deny your plays. And Baptiste is a slippery bastard, going up and down from the high ground to the low ground can be pretty hard to punish. Now, you got to make sure that if you're trying to go for aggressive plays, you know whether or not Baptiste has Immort. It has a huge cooldown, but it can deny like a number of different plays, including the Baptiste just straight up killing you if you over-int into the Baptiste, and the Baptiste just saves himself with Immort. It's something that you always have to make sure if he has it or not, or at least give yourself enough room or abilities to bail out if he ends up using it. Now, of course, Amplification Matrix is a strange one. Most of the time, if you can, you want to back out completely, but sometimes it's appropriate to push through the amplification. It's going to kind of depend on where your team is positioning and where you are. At the end of the day, good positioning around corners and denial of line of sight make you good against Amplification Matrix. Now, next up, we do got to talk about Brig, and Brig can be a fairly annoying character, especially if you're trying to dive on top of another person, a Cassidy, an Ana, whatever, and the Brig is just kind of sitting on that person, making it so the dives never go right. Most of the time, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to avoid the Brig. I mean, really, if an Ana and a Brig are sitting together, trying to dive them unless you're going in a coordinated fashion is going to be really, really difficult. So typically, you would rather try to dive a different target and avoid the Brig altogether. Put yourself in a position where the Brig is not useful to stopping the dive. So this could be an off-angling Cassidy, someone else, typically a DPS, and you're going on the person that the Brig is not stacked with. And if they're all playing together, then you can just play slow, look for a situation to get an advantage, and realize that if the entire enemy is stacked together, that they are not necessarily taking as much space as they can. So you win on a more strategic front, allowing your teammates to take more angles around. And of course, if enemies want to challenge that, they have to spread out, and there will be a vulnerability away from the Brig. On top of that, any dive should typically be done in stages. So instead of just jumping straight from the low ground to the high ground, you jump to one stage of the high ground away from the Brig, and then another that is more near the Brig, so that you're not making it so that you could just get flailed down really simply. And regardless of what character you are, realize that Brig is not an immortal character. It's not a character that is undivable herself, and it's not a character that you can't duel. I think a lot of characters can duel a Brig, surprisingly. Characters like Zen, break the shield, kick the Brig away, discord, or kill her. On a Canader, Sleeper, most DPS can deal with the Brig or duel a Brig, and most tanks just don't care. Like, Ryan's will just destroy a Brig instantly. Doomfist will boop them into the wall, although you don't want to get counterpunched. And I think outside of characters like Wrecking Ball, characters like Diva to an extent, most of these characters don't really care that much about a Brig, and they can fight them in a 1v1. Don't give the Brig more value than the Brig actually deserves by kind of remembering old Brig or thinking about old Brig. This is just not how Brig is today. She can even be the dive target if she's alone. She's not immortal, and look for Brigs that get out of position, push up too aggressively, are playing too aggressively, because Brig just shouldn't be playing like that, and that should be assigned to punish. Break the shield, focus the Brig, and it's a pretty free kill. Now, let's talk about Kiriko. And Kiriko is one of the most frustrating characters to play against and lose to for several reasons. One, it feels like this character is unpunishable. They play on off angles, they play aggressively, they try to push them, they Suzu themselves, and then they teleport away. And it's like a cycle of doing that over and over again, and it kind of feels like it's a never-ending cycle, and it's frustrating, right? And then the secondary problem with Kiriko is that she feels like any aggressive plays made onto an isolated player or the enemy team just get counteracted by a Kiriko teleporting in and saving the day. Now, the first thing that you need to make sure that you do is not allow a Kiriko to hold an off angle just permanently. Sometimes it's like, hey, there's an off angle Kiriko constantly throwing shurikens at us, and you think, I'm just gonna leave this Kiriko alone. If I push her, she's gonna teleport anyways, so let's not even clear her out. And there's a couple of problems with that. The first one is, the longer that you ignore the Kiriko, the more likely that Kiriko is gonna get a headshot or some impactful amount of damage, and even more so, if you ignore the Kiriko, they can push up, be super aggressive, and potentially kill someone on your team because they just get to be there for an indefinite amount of time. So it's actually worth the effort to go in, push them, force Suzu, force teleport, and then after the Kiriko is cleared, it's like one stage of the process where now you can push on the rest of the enemy team. The Kiriko is close to the enemy team so that they don't have the ability to teleport away because they're stacked, and Suzu is down temporarily. So as an example, let's say you clear that Kiriko, she teleports back, you push in aggressively, maybe that Kiriko already used Suzu, you nade in, you Doomfist punch it, whatever the case may be, and now you can actually punish the enemy team because the Kiriko played aggressive. Ideally, you're punishing the Kiriko for being more aggressive, and you're trying to find a window of time between clearing the Kiriko and pushing the enemy team. I would also say something that's surprising against Kiriko on a lot of characters, jumping is actually not that bad, and in many cases good against the Kiriko, which is weird because it seems like it should be normal knowledge to like never jump up against hit scans and projectiles because they can read your head. But the vast majority of Kirikos, they don't actually aim, especially from longer than very, very close distances. They are head level spamming with good crosser placement. So if you're trying to close in the gap and duel a Kiriko on like Tracer, for instance, consistently dueling them with your head, like bobbing around head level, might get you killed a lot. But jumping, blinking, making it so that when you're pushing the Kiriko, they don't just get free spam into you head level, that's actually something that is really, really strong against the character. Now, of course, with Rush can be a really weird one because it's not an ultimate that you could easily kite away or run away when they invest it. So unlike other ultimates like Amplification Matrix, for instance, it's not something that you could just back up very easily because of the speed boost, right? But oftentimes, a Kiriko ult can be countered by an aggressive use of an ability. So like as an example, let's say it's a nade, or let's say it's something like a shatter, or whatever the case may be. Your instinct is to save a lot of abilities defensively, but oftentimes when opponents are overeager, their movement becomes predictable, and that's when you can punish them the most, in the moments right after they start the rush. So it's kind of like a high risk, high reward thing, but realize that backing up and running away is not going to be enough to survive the overwhelming advantage that a rush brings and the speed it brings. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, let's talk about Lifeweaver, because Lifeweaver is a new character, but it's getting a lot of buffs and it's about to go into comp. So what are the ways that you should be shutting down a Lifeweaver? How should you be playing around this character? Well, of course, you should be trying to pressure out this Lifeweaver if at all possible. I think Lifeweaver has one of the biggest freaking hitboxes in the game, and that's definitely something that you can abuse on a tank, a DPS, or a support, and just punish the Lifeweaver a lot. Now, one of the things that you got to be careful of, though, is if you push up on top of the Lifeweaver will use their team to bail them out and kill you. So let's say you run after this Lifeweaver close range, they're going to pull their Rhine on top of them, and now you have to deal with their tank. So it's often better to actually deal with the Lifeweaver from a fair distance away, not allowing the Lifeweaver to pull a tank into you and kill you in response to you pushing up to them. So be a little bit careful about that. On top of that, you got to be really careful about playing choke points in certain areas on the map. When Lifeweaver have his ult, it's like a super Mei wall. So you have to play around it very similar that you would play around a Mei wall, understanding where the choke points are, understanding when and where you're crossing through, and making sure that you don't walk through a choke point, get walled off, and just killed for free. Definitely a pretty frustrating experience for sure. Now, I do gotta talk to you about Lucio. Lucio's a character that oftentimes in ranked play doesn't necessarily get all the perfect synergy and coordination of a team with speed boost, but the peel or boop on Lucio can be strong. The damage of him running it down and trying to kill some of your teammates can be annoying, and beat is something that feels very hard to deal with. Now, one thing that you can really do against Lucio is just ping him as much as possible when he's flying around in open space. Deal damage to him, of course, and even small amounts of damage can help make it so he doesn't get his passive heal. And then just trying to focus him and get him caught out. He's flying through the open. Shots by Ana, discords by Zen, kicks into the air, shots by Cass. Freaking any amount of damage from anybody is going to make it so that Lucio gets punished for being overly aggressive. I think that Lucio is another character where you need to be kind of aware of where he's positioning, because boops can be very annoying if you're booped into the enemy team or away when you already invest abilities. Outside of those things, beat is a very tricky one because most of the time you're gonna want to just try to wait it out. You're not gonna be able to kill anyone in this unless someone didn't get beat for some reason. You turtle up, back out as much as possible, and try to wait out the range of beat. It's hard when they combine both amp up with speed and a beat together, but unlike something like Kiriko Rush, which intrinsically has everyone pushing forward, without communication, this is not always the case up against the Lucio. So it is something to consider. And I think the most dangerous aspect of Lucio is them just speeding in a tank to a position that you're not quite used to. Speeding a Raumatra in, a Zarya in, a Rhine in. So you have to be extra careful of some of these tanks getting into positions that you're not quite used to, and you being pushed up too aggressively and then getting overwhelmed by that happening. So just be aware of that. Next up, we got to talk about Mercy. Mercy's a very frustrating character. We went over this in the DPS guide where we're talking about counters specifically to like Ashe Mercy, Sojourn Mercy, Pharah Mercy, and the list goes on. Mercy is a character that sometimes your goal is to deal damage or kill whatever it's pocketing, and sometimes you're trying to target the Mercy. It's going to kind of depend on how the Mercy is playing, what your characters are, what your composition is. Like if they're pocketing hypothetically, like maybe a Sojourn, right? You could see and look for opportunities to dive the Mercy, punish the Mercy, and ignore the Sojourn. but it's going to depend on how the Mercy is moving and how many people you have going with you to actually target and harass this Mercy. Hit scans are going to be good when the Mercy spams super jumps and flies through the air, but divers are going to be good if the Mercy is trying to get tricky around cover, denying line of sight from a lot of the hit scans and other projectiles that could kill her if she's flying in open space. Now, in addition to this, one of the things that you always need to look out for is resurrect. And I think that this is something that a lot of people mess up on, where they kill somebody, they know the Mercy's around, but they leave the body, and then the Mercy comes back and resurrects. That resurrect timer is long. You need to be camping that body for an ample amount of time. Don't allow a kill that you worked really hard for to get overwritten because you leave and you don't keep in mind that resurrect is there. Always have it in the back of your mind and realize that Mercies are really greedy for that freaking resurrect, and they're looking for it. And sometimes you can even fake a leave. Just start walking away. Pretend that you're leaving, but you're actually baiting that Mercy in, coaxing them in so that they go for the resurrect, and then you kill them, making sure that you at least punish the Mercy for trying to go for it in the first place. Next up, let's talk about Moira. Now, Moira is a little bit of a interesting character right now. Being able to fade out of Coalescence means that Moiras are going to be more aggressive than before, and I think there's a lot of Moiras that are being really aggressive in general, orbiting the backline, diving a character like Ana, and trying to deny a Moira. Now, a couple of things that you need to do to dominate this character. First one is to not panic. Realize that it doesn't matter how they play, they're going to have a consistent amount of damage, but you need to hit your shots in order to deal damage back. So it's not about your movement, and it's not about anything else besides focusing up and hitting your abilities and hitting your shots. An Ana needs to hit a sleep on the target or hit multiple shots on the target with a nade. Characters need to focus on hitting headshots against this character. This means really static movement that focuses more on increasing your accuracy than survivability. Like I said, movement doesn't increase your survivability up against this character. Now, in general, depending on the tank you are, you don't really care that much about this character, but there are ways that you can help. Like, you don't want to be pinning back as a Reinhardt, but a D.Va can eat her orbs, a Doomfist can punch her into the wall, and with most characters, if the Moira is on your backline, then there's someone on the enemy team that probably needs some amount of resources that they're just not getting, and you can punish those people instead. Forcing the Moira to play a very passive play style is just as good as killing them, honestly, because then they're just only doing heals and they're not getting anything done. Now, last up, let's talk about Zenyatta. Zenyatta might perhaps be one of the most annoying characters to deal with as a tank, because this Zen is just going to always shut you down and always put the Discord on you. Now, the first thing that you need to do is, if you ever get Discorded, you need to back up, deny line of sight, and then if you ever go for something, you need to not have Discord on you. So, like as Doomfist, for instance, I get Power Punch, I have Discord on me, I back up out of line of sight, and then I pop out and go for something really quickly. So the Zen would have to find me, Discord me, and try to do some damage to me before, and they don't know where I am, he's not anticipating it, and I'm not standing out in the open for a very long time. Basically, I'm allowing the Zen to put the Discord on someone else, and then I'm pivoting into an aggressive role. You kind of do that with every single tank, and you need to really be playing very close to corridors, understanding that in an attrition war, you're just going to lose straight up. If they're trading damage with your team and they have a Zenyatta, you're going to die, you're going to lose that. On top of that, make sure that you're respecting a Zenyatta's kick. A lot of characters just die to Zenyatta discording you, kicking you, and just keeping a good distance from you. So make sure you're respecting it a bit and don't underestimate the power of this ability. It's silently a very strong buff to the character, so just keep that all in mind. But if you have any questions about how to counter or dominate these characters, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the content, and smash that like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.